All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Happy Friday to you. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are located. My name is Lisa Sims, and I am a lead faculty in the Technology Studies Department at the University of Arizona Global Campus. And today I am pleased to welcome you to today's session, which is Beyond Trauma Informed, Embracing Wellness-Centered Engagement with Dr. Harper. Our Q&A will be at the end of the presentation. And now I'll hand it over to Dr. Harper.
Thank you, Dr. Sims. Well, hello, welcome everyone. And to help put our conversation in context, we're actually going to begin with a personal lived experience perspective, followed by a more academic perspective.
My scars do not represent the sum total of my existence. Once they shouted, today they whisper. At times they remind me of history, but my scars tell you more about them, the perpetrators. I am so much more. Do not reduce my living pulse to every wound that came before you met me. Doing so reveals more about you than about me. I humbly honor pain for the lessons taught me, but I refuse your scripted fragile frame. You don't know me. Trauma crossed my journey. It does not own the right to name me. I greet each journey around the sun with gratitude and open arms. Present and future nurtured by my whole story. A glorious work in progress. How exciting! With roots passing through my wounds but nourished by my true identity. A vital essence that can never be touched by trauma or by your illusion of who you think I am because suffering visited me. If you care about my healing, or even if you really don't care, kindly do not label me to make yourself appear an expert. My past does not define me, and neither do you. I found my strength. See me, hear me, and perhaps you'll find yours too.
Thank you, Aubrey, for sharing. And feel free to share whatever's on your heart from hearing and seeing that. And also share your thoughts to the question in the chat. How does the phrase trauma-informed shape the way we see people and communities? And just continue to share as I briefly touch on our agenda. So during our time together, we'll unpack some of the limits of a trauma-informed mindset and touch on why language matters and word choice is not just semantics. We'll move beyond the theoretical to the practical and invite all of you to share so everyone in our Zoom room can benefit from this collective expertise and wisdom we have here. So let's begin with reflecting on the image and the question. Do the words trauma, healing, and wellness all evoke the same images and emotions? Now, the purpose of this session is not to diminish the very important work done by way of the trauma-informed paradigm. There are many, many important milestones that we want to appreciate that have occurred. The term certainly increased awareness, and one of the first milestones was in the early 1990s, where the construct of trauma-informed practice emerged to draw attention to the needs of, quote, survivors of abuse and other horrific experiences. In 2001, researchers Harris and Fallett articulated the concept of trauma-informed in several articles, a newsletter, and their book, using trauma theory to design service systems. The primary focus areas at that time were understanding trauma's impact on biology and avoiding re-traumatization. In 2005, the National Center for Trauma-Informed Care was launched, expanding the approach nationally, and the model has evolved to what we see here with key principles: safety, peer support, trustworthiness, transparency, collaboration and mutuality, and empowerment, voice, and choice. From the 2010 teens to on the trauma-informed language has gained popularity in education, in health equity, legislative efforts, and beyond. And in the later 20 teens, the language in some circles continued to evolve. The first example that caught my attention was a 2018 occasional paper by Dr. Sean Ginwright titled The Future of Healing, Shifting from Trauma-Informed Care to Healing-Centered Engagement. And contemporary shifts move from viewing trauma-informed as mitigating harm to healing and wellness-centered approaches to cultivating flourishing, resilience, and growth. Now, before the trauma-informed movement, the question was, what is wrong with you? To its credit, the trauma-informed movement asks better questions, such as what has happened to you and how does that affect you? But it still tends to view people as traumatized victims or survivors. A healing-centered approach to addressing trauma requires different questions. One such question is, what is right with you? And strives to be holistic and views those exposed to trauma as agents in the creation of their own well-being rather than victims of traumatic experiences. And then a wellness-centered approach aligns with everything within the holistic healing-centered paradigm, while also being very intentional about placing wholeness in the center. Understanding that 3 students or 3 employees, all of whom lost their homes in the same hurricane, will need very different things to recover and move to a place where they're thriving. Their authentic selves are likely to be very different and from each other, and the keys to identifying what each needs to thrive is in understanding who they are. In 2018, Dr. Ginwright, who I mentioned earlier, noted that while trauma-informed care offers an important supportive lens, it also has limitations. And he first became aware of this limitation during a healing circle he was leading with young men. All of the men had experienced some form of trauma, ranging from sexual abuse to other forms of physical violence, to housing insecurity, to abandonment, or all of the above. In following the predominant trauma-informed model, Ginwright explained the impact of stress and trauma on the brain development and how trauma can influence emotional health. Marcus, one of the group members, abruptly stopped him and said, "I am more than what happened to me. I am not just my trauma." And certainly the awareness and sensitivity gained from the trauma-informed care paradigm continues to be important. However, increasingly, scholars and practitioners are coming to realize that the paradigm is just incomplete. And too often, despite efforts to articulate that there's more to trauma-informed than trauma, in practice, what often happens is that it gets reduced to this is what is wrong with you, and this is what we'll do to not re-traumatize you perspective. There are always exceptions, and we certainly applaud those. Now, Ginwright offered the term healing-centered engagement to expand how we think about our responses to trauma and to offer a more holistic approach. In sum, while well-intentioned, trauma-informed practices can fall short when they over-focus on damage, assume victim or survivor status is a permanent condition that will always need treatment or accommodation, individualize harm, and fail to place facilitating flourishing in the forefront. There's a big difference between avoiding re-traumatization and facilitating flourishing. Now, if you would, in the chat, share a phrase or policy or practice that feels damage-centered or deficit-based that you've heard or are aware of in your current setting or from another setting that you're familiar with. And I'll pause a little bit, and Lisa, if you could let me know if you're seeing any themes being shared in the chat.
All right, I'll let you know as they come in.
Okay. I'm not seeing any flashing coming up, but if something comes in, let me know.
All right.
All right. Oh, looks like somebody's sharing something.
Yeah, we have. You will always struggle with what has happened to you.
Yeah, that's a very common one.
Another one is you are traumatized.
Yeah, we've all heard them and have said them at different times. So beyond viewing healing. Oh, we got
Oh, here's some more. What's
okay.
wrong? What's wrong with you? I think we've heard that one quite. I know I've heard that quite a
Yeah.
few times.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you all for sharing and continue to share. I'm going to definitely save the chat. And now, beyond viewing healing only from a lens of mental health, wellness-centered engagement, like healing-centered engagement, is a strengths-based approach that focuses on fostering and sustaining well-being holistically. So when Aubrey said, trauma crossed my journey, it doesn't own the right to name me, and said, I am so much more, and refers to his true identity as a vital essence that can never be touched by trauma. He's coming from a wellness affirmed identity. Aubrey models coming from a vantage point of resilience, well-being, and thriving when he uses words like gratitude, being a glorious work in progress, how exciting, and I found my strength. And like healing-centered engagement, wellness-centered engagement explicitly focuses on sustaining the helpers and leaders because collectively we heal and thrive together, not in isolation. A few options for empowering strategies are listed here, but the options are really endless. And I encourage and invite everyone to share their own knowledge about options they're aware of that may not be listed here. But here are a few popular ones for us to think about. And it was very fortuitous that someone shared a verb example, because watching our bees is being mindful about what words we allow to follow. I am, you are, they are, she is, he is. Also, what do we even believe about wellness? One of the examples shared was very explicit about beliefs about wellness, using terms like always, never. And how do those beliefs impact our choices? We've heard a lot about mindfulness during the summit. I'll just put this up if anybody's interested. I encourage you to do an internet and YouTube search. There's lots of different videos on leading meditations using this particular mindfulness approach, but there are a plethora of mindfulness approaches out there. In addition to being present focused, it can be empowering to tell our story from a future perspective. So a letter to ourselves from the future, or how do you even plan to be telling your story a year from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, etc. And of course, any empowering treasure chest will include practices that boost coping chemicals like oxygen, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin, like deep breathing, smiling, laughing, physical movement, singing out loud, playfulness, and creativity. And also drawing from healing wisdom from many perspectives can be empowering. When you only have one tool, a hammer, and everything is treated like a nail, eventually something will end up more broken than it was to begin with. And several presenters in the Cultural Care Summit have shared a wide range of healing practices. Encourage everyone to explore. And there are healing practices from somatic and body-based perspectives, whether it's EMDR, TFT tapping, art therapy, dance therapy, music therapy, so many different types of healing circles. And also, I must say, there are charlatans out to misappropriate cultural traditions for profit and take advantage of people who are hurting and looking for answers and looking for peace. So knowing who we are is key to remaining centered and grounded as we explore. So trauma-informed or wellness-centered. Let's take a look at this vignette and use a thumbs up effect from Zoom if you think it's trauma-informed, or a heart for wellness-centered if you think it's that. In week 1, Maria shared that she's in therapy for PTSD. After she failed an exam, the instructor says, well, that's understandable given what you've been through. On assignments, Maria has a tendency to ramble off topic, and instead of giving her feedback or counting off on her grade, the instructor grades her very generously because she views Maria as fragile and doesn't want to upset her. So thumbs up for that being trauma-informed or heart for wellness informed. I don't know if can you see any effects? They're not showing on my screen.
We have a lot of thumbs ups going
Okay.
up.
Okay. Well, absolutely. So let's consider how a wellness-centered approach might differ. And again, there are many possibilities. This is not a cookie cutter approach at all. But in this particular scenario, let's say the instructor leads with acknowledging Maria's strengths, what she did well, either on the exam or previously in the course. She connects her career goals to her strengths and to the assignments, using language that assumes she will persist and succeed. Doesn't shy away from giving feedback about the rambling and being off topic, but places the feedback in the context of the importance of clear communication to her career goals of being an advocate. She provides resources Maria can utilize to improve her work, uses growth mindset language, uses language to enforce Maria's sense of feeling capable, resilient, and motivated to improve, and doesn't just use the language. The instructor truly believes what they're saying, which is key. Company A, B, and C. Here's an example, corporate setting. At this company, tensions have been high, burnout is high. Many employees have survived the traumatic experience of 3 rounds of layoffs over a 5-year period. Some employees have had as many as 8 to 10 different supervisors in that period. Every reorganization brings a flurry of meetings, memos, and emails, taking them away from tasks they still need to get done. And you can imagine the rest. Finally, after another series of emotionally draining quarters, team members stopped asking who was falling behind and started asking what each person needed to succeed. So with that, then they listened and implemented recommendations actually based on the feedback they received from the employees. As we see some of them bulleted on the left of the screen here. Work environment improved, productivity and profits improved, and over time, the energy shifted from exhausted to empowered. Now think about your context, where you work or a place you've worked in the past. And again, if you're comfortable, share in the chat, were there any truly wellness-centered practices? And if not, if they were, what would be something that would be experienced in a typical day, week, month, or year? And just continue to share in the chat as we move on. So one concept that is frequently considered in healing and wellness-centered approaches is, particularly when the goal is to improve outcomes within organizations, one concept is bandwidth. From a wellness-centered perspective, we recognize that many experiences, both stressors and supports, internal and external to the individual, and internal and external to the organization, impact bandwidth. From a wellness-centered engagement perspective, support is a performance strategy. It's not just a nice to have. We accept that stressors of varying degrees of intensity happen across the lifespan, from eustress to the positive changes, to the irritating, to the traumatic, and even to the catastrophic in some cases. And when life happens, we don't view our students or employees as fragile or weak, even when they are actively experiencing performance challenges. The focus is on providing effective supports and encouraging them to use them. As Aubrey said, trauma crossed my journey. It doesn't own the right to name me. Likewise, these experiences happen, but it's not who the individuals are in the core of their being. Wellness-centered paradigms are used to audit policies, procedures, and practices, and identify and hopefully eliminate or at least mitigate those that drain bandwidth and replace them with those that restore bandwidth. Okay, So now let's look at another scenario. And the next two cases have to do with policy exceptions being requested. Tabitha is a student in your program. Their advisor asks you, based from Tabitha's request, to know if there's another class they can take instead of the criminal justice or CJ course. They reportedly told their advisor that they have post-traumatic stress due to traumatic experiences related to the CJ system. This, as you will probably recognize already, this request aligns with a trauma-informed lens of avoiding re-traumatization. Now, a wellness-informed approach still is empathic and still caring, obviously, but it would be informed by the fact that the course aligns with the program learning outcomes, and which cannot be achieved with another course that's not a CJ course. Also, there is CJ-related content in two other courses that just happen not to be CJ courses. You ask and learn, so getting to know who the student is, and find out the student's career goal is to work as a substance abuse counselor. So they will undoubtedly benefit from knowledge related to the CJ system. You also know that many students in your program have either worked in the CJ system or aspire to do so. Therefore, Tabitha will undoubtedly encounter peer-initiated content relevant to CJ in the discussions. So viewing Tabitha as a whole person, understanding their career goals, as well as the disclosed history of trauma, the most compassionate thing to do is not to provide the policy exception, but rather to educate the student about the rationale behind there not being an alternative, as well as the realities they will encounter in their chosen career path and in the courses. Also, we want to make sure that they know there are effective treatments for PTSD, that the journey is not always easy, and it's certainly not always linear, but encourage them to work with a professional to learn skills that will help them personally and professionally and connect them to any resources in the university. Now, in contrast, we have TA, who has worked for the same company for the last 15 years and has taken the Title 19 training without incident, and also took it 7 years at his previous company. He recently, though, had to help his 16-year-old daughter file a sexual harassment complaint against the soccer coach. He discloses to you that he is using his EAP benefits and is working through strong emotions around the topic of sexual harassment, so he can be the source of strength his family needs. He has used personal leave to meet with attorneys, the principal, his daughter's therapist, medical appointments, and still remains ahead of schedule on his two big projects at work that he is very passionate about and reflects his love for his job. TA feels that rewatching the sexual harassment videos would not support his wellness or enhance his work performance at this time. So he offers to write a paper documenting his knowledge of Title 19, including sexual harassment, or even record a video lecture, and is open to incorporating content from all of the written materials provided by the company's training. As the HR supervisor, what would you do? In my opinion, TA is taking positive action to enhance his well-being, and the company can make choices. He's not asking to be permanently allowed to avoid the training. He's willing to document the knowledge and probably has more knowledge about sexual harassment in Title 19 than colleagues who will complete the training. So in my opinion, allowing an alternative can still meet any legal obligations to ensure that he has the knowledge and awareness. And while his company doesn't do so, many companies now have become proactive and routinely provide alternative trainings available for sensitive topics. Employees don't have to disclose their personal histories. All employees are given a choice of which version they take, and are told upfront how the information is delivered and how intense their exposure to the sensitive topics might be. Kind of like knowing whether a movie is G-rated versus R-rated, and then choosing. Okay, being mindful of time here. We'll kind of move past this, but these are just examples of how that shape the ways organizations and cultures, language impacts identities. A quick reminder though, this is absolutely not promoting a trauma denial perspective. We're not talking about minimizing the impact of negative experiences, but being supportive and understanding how individuals might be impacted by catastrophic and traumatic experiences is indeed important. But again, it's moving to build on what we've learned from the positive and negative lessons learned from the trauma-informed movement and building on to being wellness focused. Remembering the assumptions and questions from earlier, from what's wrong with you to who are you really, and remembering from Aubrey, which speaks to personal sovereignties centered around a core identity that is whole, that puts so-called scars in a place where they are acknowledged but not empowered, where externally imposed labels are not given definitional authority, where empowerment and growth are connected to being strength-focused, and where the call to action is to remind us that collective wellness is enhanced by seeing, hearing, and understanding each other's true identities. And our call to action is, with that in mind, for us to go forth and continue to identify gaps in language and approaches that hinder thriving and adopt transformative practices supporting whole person well-being. And in the time we have left here today, and we'll open it for questions while we do this as well, but an creative activity to just kind of put whatever resonated for you into another place in your being is to write a haiku and share it based on something you've heard or learned today. It could be something I said, something somebody else wrote in the chat, or other key takeaways from your own personal expertise and wisdom. I've shared a couple of examples. The first inspired by Aubrey Brooks' poem. The second is based on Dr. Ginwright's experience with Marcus that led him to coin the term healing-centered engagement, and two others based on literature that I reviewed in the trainings, I've attended. And I'd love for you to share your haikus in the chat. And if one comes to you later, you're gonna have my email address, email it to me, but I am going to share the chat. I'm going to save the chat so that I can review it. So keep sharing your haikus. And Lisa, if you see any questions or comments that you'd like to share, or haikus at this time, or any questions that haven't been addressed, let me know.
So far, we don't have any in the chat, but I will say I'll ask a question. You know, I had a traumatic experience about 2 years ago where we were in a tornado. It passed over our house, but it didn't, thank God it didn't damage our house and everything. And so, you know, we're still kind of panicky when, you know, we get these weather alerts and everything. So, you know, trying to come up, what are some strategies that you would suggest to kind of help us not always feel like we're in a cat in a room full of rocking chairs waiting for
Well, I can't recommend specifically. I know some strategies that people have said are helpful are the breathing techniques. It's wise to be mindful of tornado watches and warnings. And also accepting that those emotions that happen, because they come from experiences of wisdom. But you can certainly learn ways to manage and kind of dump some coping chemicals in the system. So like the breathing, the mindfulness, even the laughter yoga, creativity, finding a way to express what you did experience in a creative way, whether it's writing a song, creating a dance, the art therapies, all of those can help put those in a different place. As the literature has told us, those experiences also get encoded in our bodies. So some physical or somatic based healing approaches can be useful for many people. Acupuncture has been extremely useful for many people. So that massage therapy, and EMDR. Again, I mentioned earlier. And so getting to a place where we can still remember the what we learned from the experience, but our body doesn't place us back in that experience all the time. So again, it's acknowledging the experience. We're not pretending it didn't happen. It was very real. But how can I now keep my body from taking me back there when I'm not there?
And
Great
those are all
question.
And those are great tips. And I see that Michael has entered in the chat his haiku, and it's a soft breath and steady ground. Choice returns to the body and healing grows within. So thank you, Michael, for those. And so, as we come to the end of our session, we want to give a big thank you to Dr. Harper for the time and the insights that she has provided. And we also want to give a big thank you to all of you who have attended today's session. And so, as we conclude, we thank you for your attendance. And on behalf of the University of Arizona Global Campus, thank you. And please have a great rest of your day. And also, if you feel that this presentation, you would like to nominate it for an outstanding presentation, that information is in the chat as well. And I also put the link so that you can go to the other sessions as well. But kudos again, Dr. Harper. We thank you so much for all your insight.
And thank you, Dr. Sims, and everyone who came here on a Friday morning. All right. And those who are watching it later as well. And again, here's my email. If you didn't get a chance to put your haiku, or you wake up in the morning with one, email it to me, and I'll be saving the chat as well. Y'all enjoy the rest of your conference.
All right. Enjoy, everyone.